The World of Kong, A Natural History of Skull Island. Ooh, ho, the Golden Stallion here with you for another Wednesday Sovereign Tech Q&A. I'll give you a little insider, a little behind the scenes info. This is actually getting recorded on Monday, that being Monday the 26th of March 2018. I can't believe we're already pretty much into April of 2018. This year has seemed to blow by, but it's been a good time. Certainly this weekend I was having a hell of a time. As you know, last weekend it was recorded from a castle. Stephanie and I were recording that. This weekend we had, of course, the amazing Ellen and Stephanie were both on the show. And boy, Ellen and Stephanie and I, we had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We ended up going to Fun Spot, the largest arcade in the world, quote unquote, or well, anyway, certainly the largest retro arcade. I think that's fair to say. And I might give a review because this is one of a very few times that I've been to Fun Spot, and in fact, it might only be my second time. And I want to talk about it quite a bit because it is such. I mean, not that it needs free press from me. You know, it's already reached out to much larger audiences than Sovereign Tech has. But it was quite the inspiration, and the three of us just had an absolutely wonderful time. Anyway, it was really wild. But boy, yeah, World of Kong. Some other books that will be coming out, of course, you know the URL now, books.sovereigntech.com. Or let's see, there's books.zog.ninja, right? That's the one that'll take you to where you can find on Patreon, you can find all the MediaFire links to all of the books, the rare books that I've been releasing that aren't available in ebook and are often out of print and cost ridiculous amounts of money for people to get their hands on. And I say, fuck that, free the information, and that's what I'm doing. In fact, it was really kind. I was telling Ellen about it, the whole plan and everything, and she thought it was absolutely heroic. Put an amazing smile on her face. So it was really sweet. So anyway, I'll take that brand of heroism, and I'm all for it. But yeah, so the more books will be coming out for that. I know I've already had some people ask what they would be, but maybe you just got a little preview into what some of these could be, because it's going to be a pretty varied selection. It's not all history books or classic novels and things like that. It might be some things that, boy, you just never expect, but like I said, are long out of print and really no good reason for them to be so, other than, Hollywood's just a money-making machine, and, the genuine artwork created by the artists that make the great movies and all the things that we enjoy, generally all the work that they get put into it, once the money stops flowing, so does the art, and that's a shame unless you happen to own it, and then you can get it out there to people, which I want to do. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to get into your questions. And we've got some beauties this week. Well, there's some tech, there's some science, there's some geek. I mean, we're gonna run the gamut. And of course, we do have the album of the week. Whoo, poet didn't know it. That I'll get into. And also those looking for this month's March's Sovereign Tech newsletter. That'll be coming out later this week, but it will be out later this week. It's pretty much done. Just a couple sections I have to add in. And yes, this month's short fiction will actually be Star Trek. It won't be. It'll be for the Star Trek erotic audio theater that I'm putting together with just tremendous women. It's really been quite a pleasure, and you'll get to find out a little bit about that. And I think it was a lot of fun. So. I love the fact that people really dig the short fiction that I put out there. I'm so honored by that, and it's totally for free. Really, I don't even necessarily need your email addresses. I love writing it. It's totally a passion project on my part, and just really enjoyable. And I'm glad so many other people think it's so hot. So hopefully you'll find this first bit of Star Trek. Not that every month for the newsletter is going to be Star Trek short fiction, but just to kind of prep things and to get people excited. Yeah, we'll do it this month. So, and it's also not that short. I was writing for quite a bit, but anyway, regardless, let's get into these questions. And you know what? Let's start it off with we'll start it off with a tech question. The science question is good too, but let's start off with the tech question because it's not a very lengthy one. So let's see. Where is it? Okay. Yeah, on with the question. I'm trying to download some videos that use the Wistia video player. I used to use Video Download Helper and it worked great, but since Firefox's big update, it's rarely able to find the video on a page. Do you have any suggestions for Firefox add-ons or tools to download web videos? Yeah, okay, so to download videos from anywhere, not just YouTube. So just with YouTube, there has been a real shakeup in the past year because of some new back-end implementations that Google has been going through. Not just the fact that, so Firefox, as we know, when they came out with version, I guess is that 57 back in November 2017, which is Firefox Quantum, which I certainly recommend everybody use. And it's just getting better. It literally just keeps getting better, which is so hard to believe. But they completely redid their add-on layer, how you can put on add-ons, or what in Chrome what they call extensions, but on Firefox it's add-ons. They completely redid it where it uses a Chrome compatibility layer now, so that way it's easier for extensions from Chrome to get ported to Firefox. But then all the old Firefox add-ons had to get ported kind of to Chrome, even though Mozilla did a great job of making it as easy as possible to port over that code. But this did affect a lot of older Firefox add-ons, or even newer ones, where suddenly some functionalities disappeared, or the developer decided, okay, here's my chance to get in on a subscription model, and I'm going to come out with a pro version of whatever my extension is, and then people lost features. Whatever the hell happened. I mean, it's really been a shakeup in the past year. Not just because of Firefox, but regardless, I know the person's not complaining about Firefox; they just want a solution. A lot of the websites that I think a lot of people were using, I think KeepVid's down now, which that's been a stalwart for a long time, but I was just there the other day and it didn't function. There's always been a few others. There used to be anything to mp3.net. I mean, if you're looking to convert to mp3 or whatever, and there had been some handy add-ons that could do it as well. And really with Chrome, not so much, because with Chrome, especially for YouTube, with Chrome, Chrome made it so that you effectively, or in the Chrome Web Store, they made it so that anything that could download YouTube videos wasn't allowed in the Chrome Web Store. So Chrome Web App Store, obviously. So, it's been tough, and a lot of websites have come and gone, but some are still out there. Some of the classics are still out and about. And if you're trying to get video from any web page, not just YouTube, there is a website I'm going to mention. If you're wanting to do it through YouTube, just a YouTube video, VLC is still great for where you go to the media tab, and then you go to open network stream, and then you click play and then save as, and it'll give you the video. That's a really great way. In fact, I think you can get the download link for anything. You click play, and maybe it won't give you the download link for anything. But anyway, so using VLC to download YouTube videos is a great option that still works most of the time. But there is a website that I do enjoy using, and it's 9xbuddy.com. So 9, the number 9, the letter X as in X-ray, and then buddy.com. And this website can download from pretty much anything. Now, anytime you go to these sites, of course, make sure you're running your ad blockers, because, there's all kinds of crazy ads. Half of them are probably malicious, but 9xbuddy.com is probably the best one out there. I mean, I used to use, there's the trick of where you type in, specifically more so with YouTube videos, where you could type in before any, what you do is you go to the YouTube video, and then in your address bar, you'd get rid of the HTTPS, and you would put in deturl.com/ and then whatever, www.youtube.com, and then whatever the video is. And then what that does is takes you to a site that can give you a download link, or it can give you, it tells you all the various tools you can use to get download links and everything. And in fact, that's where I originally found, back when I used to use that a lot, that's where I found 9xbuddy.com. So that's 9xbuddy.com works on just about everywhere. You could put in, something from CBS News and it would download it, as far as I've experienced. So hopefully that ends up working for you. And that 9xbuddy.com has like a ton of different options too, as far as what it can download, and how you can download it and everything. I mean, if you don't need music, like clipconverter.cc, if I just need, I mean, that's usually what I use. Like when I'm ripping audio that I put in, say, the beginning of a Sovereign Tech episode, of a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, or that I put in the middle of a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, whatever, something that I use for my work, I will often use clipconverter.cc. But if it's music, that doesn't necessarily work. However, 9xbuddy.com certainly does. But Clip Converter is a well-known standard that does a great job of, like, it's an all-in-one suite. It won't fuck around with copyrighted material. Speaking of which, I had to use 9xbuddy.com actually this morning. So that's my answer to the question as far as the solution for downloading videos. That's the way to go. But I had to download one this morning because a couple things that I saw. Actually, these are going to be in the newsletter, so I don't know if I should share with you now, but I think it was at WonderCon this year where they had half the Star Trek Discovery cast and half of the Star Trek Discovery crew, as in, people that produce the show. And they played like this deleted scene from the last episode, or like this extra scene. I don't know that it was exactly deleted, because where the fuck would they have put it? And wow, was that awesome. And I downloaded that right away because it had Empress Georgiou in it. We got some, spoiler alerts, we got some Section 31 action in it. We got the black badges. Oh, fuck yes. So, which is cool that we're going to get some more Section 31 because, as you'll find out actually in the newsletter, like the Star Trek audio theater that I'm putting, erotic audio theater that I'm putting together, has to do with the Section 31 team. So perfect if that's the hotness that's going on right now, and that's going to be lighting up some search engines. But anyway, yeah, check out that deleted scene with Empress Georgiou and kind of what happens with her fate. Like I said, I think it was last week when it was just me and Stephanie. It wasn't me, Stephanie, and Ellen. I had said that Empress Georgiou is my favorite character. Well, now she just has even more reason to be before I even knew it. But that was so cool. So, okay, let's get on to another question here. Let's go on to the science question. Then maybe we'll get into the geeky shit. So let's see. The last couple of times you've talked about post-scarcity, you've brought up the semantic argument that it's impossible because there is a finite amount of matter in the universe. I completely agree with this. The concern I have is when you have also said that the existence of a grand unified theory is unlikely. If your cosmology is one of constraints and limitations, would it not follow that there is a consistent description of those limits? Would love to hear why you don't think this is a contradiction. Woo, okay, yes, so I don't think we'll ever find a theory of everything. I am not alone on this. Plenty of astrophysicists and physicists completely agreed that there would be no theory of everything, and I say that with all respect to Stephen Hawking, because, certainly one of the largest proponents that we would end up finding this. And there's really a couple answers to this sort of thing, okay? And one is, now ironically, so speaking of Stephen Hawking was also a major proponent of M theory, or what some people would know as string theory or superstring theory, where the idea is that you have, so many, 12 to 13 dimensions, whatever, so many dimensions that make up what we know of as the universe. And now, part of the problem with M theory, while it, helps fill in a lot of gaps in our knowledge, particularly in, when it comes to things like general relativity, quantum mechanics, and all that, and how all these things can be squared away. It's a very difficult concept to prove, because how do you prove that there are, all of these all these other dimensions? Like how exactly does that come together? And it's been a challenge for this theory that, again, makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it, even though one would argue that M theory leads to a TOE, it leads to a theory of everything. But ironically, a lot of the math and a lot of the same kind of ideas, and certainly that merging of, quantum mechanics and general relativity, can lead to other theories, like LQG, right? So, which is loop quantum gravity, okay, which, it's similar to M theory and fits in, also fills in a lot of these gaps, but also doesn't gel so much with electromagnetism and some other aspects. So there's the possibility of explaining a lot of this stuff, without having to run to a theory of everything, even with a lot of the really, impressive theoretical frameworks that have been created over the past few decades, which a lot of people say pointed M theory. Other people, again, would go with something newer, or not that it's necessarily newer, but, loop quantum gravity. But regardless of that, there's a much simpler answer to all this. Okay. And it's called emergence. So emergence is a concept that doesn't just apply to the physical sciences. It can apply to philosophy. It can apply to, more of nature. It can apply to life. It can seemingly apply to anything. And the basic idea behind emergence is that you have, a larger entity emerges, okay, from a bunch of smaller and not always, but simpler entities. But then what happens is this larger entity that emerges, or this larger thing that emerges, has properties that the sum of its parts don't have. Okay, even human life in a way is, like the human body itself is a product of, it's a product of evolution, but a product of emergence. Okay, so what can happen here is that, and this is one of the better ways to explain how you have, in physics, how you have classical mechanics, right? Classical mechanics work on a very large scale, but when you get to the smaller scale, obviously that's when quantum mechanics come in. Okay, and of course, as I always say, you want to be careful when people say the word quantum, but I'm not saying anything outlandish here. Okay, I'm not making any bold claims. But what I'm saying is that, when you get down to, to the, say, subatomic level, okay, classical mechanics doesn't work when you get down there. But we know that what makes up the rules as we understand them of classical mechanics are built on top of, the subatomic level, what's happening within quantum mechanics itself. Okay, so emergence is, that's really the answer to this question, is that you can have rules that change based upon rules that are very different at a much smaller scale. Like the laws of thermodynamics, right? Very, very simple. Okay, but what makes up the laws of thermodynamics are incredibly complex. Just like, and that's an irony with the relationship between classical and quantum mechanics. Okay, is that you would think that maybe the classical mechanics would be, or that the quantum mechanics, because they're at the smaller scale, right, would be the more complex of the two, and they're not. Like the classical mechanics are actually the simpler, when maybe they should be the more complex because it's at the larger scale. So emergence is kind of my answer to that. And there have been, I don't remember the name of the very first book I ever read that talked about this, but this is generally, the concept of emergence is generally what will get batted at anytime somebody talks about, we're going to end up with a theory of everything. The rules really do change at scale. Okay, and again, emergence goes well beyond just physics, right, or astrophysics. Emergence is like it's part of philosophy. I'd very much emergence. Emergence makes sense even with like the Dunbar number. That's sort of like society's a fiction, but groups of people is not necessarily a fiction, right? Not in its strictest definition, because you can have more than one you can have a bunch of people standing in one spot, and that equates a group. But I think emergence makes sense there, where there are rules that make sense, within the Dunbar number, within the Dunbar or Dunbar's number, however you want to say it, within the Dunbar number, where sure, anywhere between 5 to 15 people or less than that, even, you can, there's a certain way that relationships work. When you get bigger than 15, the rules change. Humans didn't change. And everything that governs, or that biologically governs the individual hasn't changed. But, once you get into these higher scales, okay, of some kind of order, which, even like the concept of spontaneous order is a byproduct, or a product, not a byproduct. It's an actual product of emergence. Okay. Once you get into those higher orders, then yeah, honestly, like the ways that the same entity, that being a human, interacts will dramatically change. This is something I've talked about for years on Sovereign Tech. It's one of my long-standing I don't want to say a precept, but one of my and it's not a principle, but one of my, I guess, theory, one of my long-standing theories is that part of the problem why people feel they need government and why there's, so many of the terrible things that seem to stand against the individual in the world is partly because there is this real conflict with, especially today, how do you handle dealing with 8 billion people at any given moment? Or even if it's just in your Facebook's friends list and it's 5,000 people, like you're not equipped, you're not designed to handle that, but then you're being given tools that allow you to. And, how does that, I think that alone, can create a friction. Or living in cities, things like this. It's not an argument for any kind of, it's not an argument for any kind of nationalism, because I would argue the national scale is just as bad. Arguments for nationalism are horrendous. Being able to trade on a global scale, if that's the definition of globalism, nothing wrong with that. But you get my point, is that I think that a lot of different systems absolutely can work. I think a lot of things make sense to a lot of people. And it's just like, look, and I want you to be intellectually honest with yourself. Okay. Tell me the family system, properly practiced, with respect to all individuals involved, including the children, because that's all they are little humans. They deserve the same rights, if there are rights, which there aren't, but you get my point. Tell me that's not socialism. Tell me that's not some kind of brand of communism that happens in the family. Like, really, do you make that baby earn its booties? Give me a fucking break. Okay? But just like, and that's the thing, is that, it seems at these scales that somehow, maybe this sort of stuff works. I'm not arguing for socialism. I'm not arguing for communism. I am just saying that the human existence is incredibly dynamic, and it changes based upon the scale at which it's functioning on, the scale at which it's at, and that's emergence. Or that's a, a product of emergence. And this goes true for the laws of the universe. Is that they, when you get to certain scales, things, not that they like the emergent properties, okay, appear to have changed, but at the base level, nothing has really changed. That's why you can make the statement that, okay, you can't add energy or matter to the universe. Like, it's a finite amount. But then outside of that, what that matter ends up becoming and what that matter ends up doing and how it behaves, those rules can be very different than what it is at, say, the atomic or subatomic level, which comprises that matter. Okay, so that's how I square that away. Not a wild idea. And not to say that it's 100% accepted in science. Maybe it's like a 50-50 or a 60-40. But that's a fairly common scientific concept. So, and really, that I didn't even have to bring up M theory or anything for that, but whatever. there you have it. Like M theory. So I've had a real kind of like love-hate relationship with that, and I know that M theory is pretty much being used to try and describe a theory of everything. But a scientific theory that has really fallen out of vogue, but was pretty wild back in the 90s, that I bring up a lot, is the idea that there is a dimension for gravity that leaks gravity. Like, like that's where gravity, that's the mystery of gravity. Where does it come from? Well, it leaks from this other dimension. And so string theory or superstring theory or M theory, plays into this math that allows for, there's actually these other dimensions and where all this other stuff, kind of comes together to create what we experience as the real world. And, years ago, maybe I talked about this when I was going really deep diving on this, that potentially, maybe there's another dimension that M theory isn't considering that could be this, where gravity is leaking in from. But then also that would turn M theory into something perhaps closer to, like the LQG theory, which would then, kind of kill the notion that there's a theory of everything. Okay, so because again, I don't think you're going to find that, and I think you find, I mean, ironically, like emergence itself isn't a theory of everything. Before anybody says that, because it doesn't necessarily apply to everything, but it seems to work in a lot of different places. But in and of itself, it's not a rule because it's the changing of rules, or physical rules. Obviously not rules made by asshole authoritarians. So, okay, I hope I answered that. That's not a topic I've gone into much in recent years, but yeah, I just want to say, like, I don't go out of my way to be contrarian scientifically, or to go out and look for alternative theories. I entertain them as I experience them, and granted, I use a pretty good baloney test before I even start to entertain them, but I am willing to entertain them. I've talked about this many times. One of my favorite theories is the one that came out of the University of Alberta, where they mathematically showed, oh no, the universe might not have had a beginning at all. It might have just always been here, and it will always be here. That appeals to certain sensibilities of mine, and I recognize that it's making me feel good in a way, right? But regardless if that's to make me feel good, I mean, the Big Bang just doesn't make, in my opinion, just doesn't gel. It doesn't. There's too many problems with it. Same thing with dark matter, dark energy. I know there's been some interesting revelations, shall we say, recently that point at, oh no, maybe we can pinpoint sources of dark matter, dark energy, and all that. Yeah, I don't know. Way more faith-based than my feel-good feeling about the universe always having been here. And not that that's even a new idea. I mean, Epicurus talked about that. But regardless, let's move on. So, but yeah, if you've never heard of loop quantum gravity, I definitely recommend checking that out. It's pretty wild stuff. I mean, there's evidence against it, sure, but there's evidence against all of them. So especially if you've really bought into M theory, I really recommend looking into loop quantum gravity, because it's a nice twist on that fits in better with, well, emergent properties. So anyway. And if you think I'm completely dead wrong, or want to hear something else on all this, I'm happy to do deep dives in physics. I don't even know if I could call myself an armchair physicist. It is a passion of mine. It's not in my top 3, but it is an absolute passion of mine that I take very seriously and I read up on all the time. But anyway, I'll let you ask me the questions on that. Or if you think somehow I misinterpreted something, you go ahead, email me, let me know. That's the beauty of science, is constant debating. All right, so let's get into some of the fun questions here. How about that? Got a Q&A question for you. In your Area X trilogy review, you mentioned reading Lovecraft. I'm a big fan of Lovecraft and weird fiction. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on HLPs. Of course, HLP is HP. Or I guess HPL, sorry, it says HLP, but yeah, later it says HPL. HPL is, HP Lovecraft works. Love to hear your thoughts on HPL's work as well as weird fiction in general. What's your favorite HPL story and any weird fiction you've enjoyed? So, okay, this might be, I don't know. So here's the thing with weird fiction. Within science fiction, and I don't know that you can necessarily put weird fiction is like a subgenre of science fiction, maybe more of it's a type of horror fiction, right? But within like fiction realms, fiction reader realms that I have frequented in my life, weird fiction wasn't so much a part of it. Like I never met people so in music, say in heavy metal, you can get a lot of people who are just really into thrash metal, right? Or they're really into I don't like the term, but they're really into hair metal, or they're really into, some subgenre of metal. They're really into black metal, doom metal, whatever. There's a million different terms now for this shit. And while I've certainly in metal scenes, I've encountered where you have those people that are just only into thrash, right? I've never really encountered in my time, I've never encountered groups of people who were, I've met what could be called Lovecraftian societies, right? Where like these people who that's all they do is they just worship the works of Cthulhu, and I completely respect that, and I think it's awesome. Okay, but like I've never really met entire groups who were only into weird fiction. Like I guess I've met groups that were really only into alternative history, which I mean a lot of people have done that kind of work. But you think of like Harry Turtledove, like I remember his first book I ever read from him, Agent of Byzantium. Awesome. Or, a lot of people really got into Guns of the South, which makes you wonder about some of the alternative history people. But regardless, you find groups like that, but, you never find, like, I've never really encountered people where that's all they do is like they're just into weird fiction. But ironically, most of, did I mention the name? I'll get to what my favorite Lovecraft story is. Ironically, as far as weird fiction goes and Lovecraftian style, horror and fiction, and not just the fact that like it includes slime or something like that. Though Lovecraft had a very unique blend of all these different ideas where, things happen on a cosmic scale. There was a lot of mystery. The humans were, very misanthropic. The humans are almost meaningless, and the ones that do matter, have very odd parentage, right? Where, they're birthed from some demon or something like that. All of which I think are, some of which I dare say is almost sexy, but it falls generally under a type of horror. But a lot of my favorite authors, including, my favorite arguably of all time, Harlan Ellison, he would write plenty of Lovecraftian horror. In fact, there was an episode of, what was it? Yeah, it was one of the newer Scooby-Doo cartoons. Was it Mystery Incorporated, where there was an episode, I want to say it was called like The Shrieking Madness or something. But anyway, in it, you have, and this was really cool. This is a deep, deep cut. And this is part of the reason that Scooby-Doo is always so awesome. You actually had, in the mystery, you had two characters helping out, Scooby and the gang. And it was H.P. Lovecraft, who was voiced by Jeffrey Combs, who played, if I remember right, he played Lovecraft himself in Necronomicon back in 93, and the movie. And then you had Harlan Ellison, like cartoon versions of Lovecraft and Ellison hanging out together. And of course, Ellison voiced himself and did a phenomenal job as usual because he's God. And that was so wild. Like if you can find that, what a great melding of worlds, to have Scooby-Doo, which is awesome in the first place. But then, to have Harlan there and to have HP there. And like Harlan even says, come on, HP, let's go get it. I mean, it's just tons of, and for them to get Jeffrey Combs, of course, Jeffrey Combs, people would mainly know later on for, in fact, Ellen and Stephanie and I, we did our Star Trek update where we talked all about the best episodes of Deep Space Nine. Jeffrey Combs would end up being, playing Wayum and other characters in, he'd also play General Shran, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and then Shran, of course, in Star Trek Enterprise. So anyway, all that, a lot of fun. That's just that I just thought about that. That was so awesome. But anyway, Harlan Ellison would certainly do his fair share, particularly if you read some of the stories in Shatterday, his collections in Shatterday, Shatterday is one of his short story collections. Even in Troublemakers, I think he included some stories that were very Lovecraftian, and Deathbird stories. I mean, he just has a ton of them. He's the guy that got me into Lovecraft. Okay, was Harlan Ellison. Not necessarily because I recognized when I was first reading Ellison's short stories that, that's who he was, kind of channeling. That's who he was mimicking to a degree, or paying homage to, but because he would talk about him so often. So that was my real introduction to learning about Lovecraft. Then of course there's the RPGs, the tabletop RPGs for Cthulhu. I mean, those are wildly popular back before they're even officially printed. They've been wildly popular. Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate the whole Cthulhu mythos. I think that, it's become an internet meme now to where it's used to joke just about any, make fun of just about any politician, which I think is great. That's wonderful. I mean, it's hard to believe, like, with as much a part of pop culture that even now more so, that Lovecraft has become, or that Cthulhu has certainly become. In fact, I think I have a Funko Pop over here of Cthulhu, but regardless, with the, with all the tendrils and tentacles coming from his mouth. It's amazing to consider that Lovecraft, died pretty much penniless. I mean, he lived most of his life in Providence, right? In Rhode Island. And he only lived to be 40 something, I think, had like maybe a 30-year writing career at best. And I mean, it was a tough slog, but now everybody just worships what he put out there, or not everybody, but I think a lot of people do, and they don't realize that it's him. But his work was awesome. I mean, is absolutely tremendous, and obviously way ahead of its time. And that's why so many people, now I know, so with the Area X trilogy, right? That was mentioned that I did a huge review of, which is based on the movie Ellen and I saw, which was Annihilation. In the Area X trilogy, Vandermeer has pretty much created what he considers to be, because I said that was Lovecraftian, like that book was, and he's more or less come up with a genre that he calls new weird fiction. And you have a few different writers in this. Now, I don't know that I've ever read anything else in that vein. I've certainly read from the classics, but you got to understand, so many people have written what would be classified as weird fiction, right? Ray Bradbury, Colin Wilson. I mean, you could F. Paul Wilson. Hell, while we're going down the Wilsons. So many science fiction authors would certainly dabble, dip their toes into that realm and do it very well. But Lovecraft really set the stage for much of that. Even, I remember the first time I'd heard the word Lovecraft, which was before, or, heard the name, which was before Harlan Ellison really got me into it, was that I found he was the best friend of Robert E. Howard, which the Conan books were seminal for me as a teenager. I remember hearing that and then saying, there's some Lovecraftian influence within the Conan books. And after, you read the Cthulhu mythos and some of his other stuff, you get it. You see where that kind of came in and where these guys may have influenced each other sort of in both directions. Where I think maybe Robert E. Howard would give Lovecraft the tool set, shall we say, on how to craft like an ancient history, because Robert E. Howard was obviously the master of that without having to necessarily explain it so much. And I think that's part of what gives Lovecraftian horror and Lovecraft's own work a lot of its mystery, is just this kind of ethereal ancientness. I don't know what term to use there exactly, but yeah. So anyway, my favorite Lovecraft book or novella, I suppose technically, has to be At the Mountains of Madness. Huge deal for me, this book. At the Mountains of Madness, it's part of the Cthulhu mythos. It can totally stand on its own if it needs to, though. And it is just, it's all the stuff I love, right? You have this expedition going to Antarctica. They're finding all these hieroglyphs there, and they're, all this ancient shit. And, you have the character of William Dyer, the geologist, and he's trying to warn everybody. And in fact, it's one of the rare books. I mentioned this when I talked about Area X, that I really can't stand first person perspective. This is another one where it worked. It was okay. In fact, I dare say that Annihilation is in many ways, I think Vandermeer took a lot of cues from At the Mountains of Madness. The more I thought about it, after I was asked that question, what's your favorite Lovecraft story? And I thought about it, I was like, it came up pretty quickly. It was At the Mountains of Madness. And the instant I thought about that, it's trying to stop expeditions. There's these expeditions to this part of Antarctica and it just clicked. It was like, Annihilation's just At the Mountains of Madness in the modern day, and with Alien, or with the Shimmer and everything, instead of talking about some great war with Cthulhu or some bullshit like that. Okay. Or not bullshit, but you get my point, because in At the Mountains of Madness, right, it's the Elder Things that built all this, and then they that was around when the moon formed, and oh man, that's so cool to get all that history in it. I love that, even more so than the horror, just that constant discovery. There's the terror that comes with the discovery, but the discoveries themselves just feel so primal and so, I don't know, it just feels wild. And I think even, I don't know to what degree at the time that maybe Robert E. Howard could have influenced Lovecraft with this, but I think you get whiffs of it, but that's not to take anything away from Lovecraft, because Lovecraft equally, I think, influenced a lot of Robert E. Howard's work. especially later Conan stories, whether that's for the good or the bad. But regardless, big fan. And the weird fiction outside of it, like I said, I love the stuff that Harlan Ellison has done, within what could be called weird fiction. And a lot of what the more major science fiction authors, but I never really dug deep into the subgenre itself. That was kind of the point I was making at the beginning here. Not to say that there aren't those groups of people that are just, that's all they are about. They're all about weird fiction, and they get together every Friday night and they light some candles and they do their thing. I think that's fucking hot. I think it's wonderful. Okay. I know that they're out there. I just never really experienced them. And so maybe that's why I never dived deep into it as as its own separate subgenre and really appreciated it as that. But whenever a science fiction author has done it, I recognize the Lovecraftian leanings and influences, and I always think it's really, really cool. And I am definitely a big fan of good old HPL there. So, okay, let's move on from that. Get on to another question, and feel free to if you want to message me and let me know what your favorite Lovecraft stories are. I'm totally down with hearing that. Maybe I should add at the Mountains of Madness into. I'll put that in the book club segment of the Sovereign Tech newsletter this month, so people can think to look that up, because it's a great place to start if you've never gotten into the Cthulhu mythos, because it just hooks you with everything that's going on. So in the first person perspective, like I said, in this case, it really does work impressively, in fact. So, okay. Let's see if I can shorten this one up. So you're talking recently about the 3DS. Okay. All right. So what's the greatest console of all time? Sure. I might have answered one like this before, but I know I've gotten newer patrons and maybe haven't gone back and listened to the whole back catalog. I mean, there's well over 200 episodes for Patreon listeners that you get access to. So I can understand but I can't even, thinking that there's over 200, I can't remember every question that's been asked in the past. So I'm not exactly sure if I've covered what I consider the greatest console of all time, or if my answer would now change as I answer it at this point. So just putting out that disclaimer. Greatest console of all time. And you guys and gals and Z's, you can let me know if what yours is, and then I can kind of compare and contrast from that when you ask these kinds of questions. That's fine with me. So the greatest console of all time, my instantaneous answer is the Sega Dreamcast. That's my quick answer, but I might, there's some wiggle room there. Okay. The Sega Dreamcast, and I've talked about this before. I've actually I haven't released it yet, but I've written a book about the Sega Dreamcast. And I did interviews with execs from from Sega, about it, because I was so passionate about this system. I thought this system was the fucking bee's knees. I was so excited about this, and then it got canceled, and I think that colored it for all time. But the Sega Dreamcast had just about anything that exists in a modern system, that even its competitors in its generation, and even which is the Dreamcast with, I think that's 6th generation, because we're in 8th or 9th now, depending upon how you want to count, Project Scorpio and all that, or the PS4 Pro. Even the others, its competition was the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. Now the GameCube, spoiler alert, the GameCube might actually be my favorite system of all time. I love the fucking GameCube, and I'll explore that in a minute. But the Dreamcast, even what would come after, the Xbox 360s and Xbox 360 and others in the following generation, it would have features that even those systems still didn't have. The modern game console is just now catching up to, in my opinion, all of the features that the Dreamcast had. This thing, the Sega Dreamcast, was a fucking lifestyle. Okay, it really, really was, because it's a home console, but you carried it in your pocket. What do I mean by that? Well, here's feature number one. Here's one of the features that we'll talk about. It's a laundry list I'd have to go through. I'd take a whole episode. You had what was called the memory card. Memory cards used to be a thing Modern gamers probably don't know jack shit about it, but old school and not so old school people remember memory cards and just how goddamn important those things were. That was like the most important thing in your life. Oh shit, what happened to my memory card? Oh, what happened to my save file? Blah, 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 right? So Dreamcast turned the memory card into a very, very serious part of the system. Now, not every game took advantage of it, but what it was actually called a VMU, a video memory unit. Now, because not a lot of people would take advantage of what the VMU could do, eventually they would just release memory units or memory cards that would just have like 4 times the storage, and they got rid of the video part of it. But what was the video part? The video part was a literal mini console. It was like a Game Boy in your hand. It would slide into the Dreamcast controller, okay, and there was an open window on the Dreamcast controller that would allow for the screen that's on the VMU, on the memory card, to show through it, okay? So when you were playing a game, you'd get all these different stats and data and everything that would appear there. Now, the GameCube would do something similar where you had a link cable between the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo GameCube. And like if you were playing like Phantom Hourglass, Wind Waker. What am I saying? Phantom Hourglass. I think it was Wind Waker. When you were playing Wind Waker, you could control like one of the fairies that could like drop bombs effectively or something, and so it would turn into a 2-player game. Or it could work as a second screen to show you other information, or you could play Link and the Four Swords or some stuff like that. On the GameCube, it wasn't something that ended up getting used a lot either. But in any case, on Dreamcast, it was a little more of a single-player affair, where it would give you data, it'd give you all this information, and some games would come with mini games. One of the more popular ones would be the JRPG Skies of Arcadia, one of the greatest games ever made. And that actually had a mini game that you could play at a certain point that you played on the VMU, because when you took the VMU out of the controller, it actually had controls. It had a D-pad, it had a little digital pad, a little cross pad, and it had like a B and an A button or whatever, and a start button. And so it was a full-on, you could look at stats of your save files, you could look at all this different stuff, you could get data from the game that you were playing, and you could even play games on it. And it was all it was the fucking memory card. This is how much thought they put into this system. It was crazy, and that's why I say it was a lifestyle. Because why would you leave your memory card at home when you could play games on it, right? And so it was always with you. It was always a part of you. So it was a lifestyle. Also, you could the way that, like, say you went over to a buddy's house and you had your video card, or you had your memory card with you, your VMU. You could plug it into the second player controller, and you could end up, say you're playing Power Stone 2 or something, you could end up with different experiences based upon how far you had gotten and what you had earned on playing Power Stone at home. I mean, it's just like, this is a dramatic shift. I mean, these are literally tectonic plates moving in console gaming with the Dreamcast. And most people, I don't know if people just didn't have the brains for it and all they wanted to do was play Madden, which, credit to the Dreamcast, that broke up the EA monopoly on sports games. And, Sega totally did that, because Sega delivered some great fucking sports games for the Dreamcast, regardless, which would end up morphing into, other franchises, 2K Sports and whatever else. Regardless of that, the system, like, it would have internet connectivity, which, granted, its predecessor, the Sega Saturn, would be the first one to have internet connectivity and have a web browser built into it and everything. But the Dreamcast took it to the next level, had a web browser, could do other things. Of course, you had the amazing game Phantasy Star Online, which was an MMO, way ahead of its time on consoles. And and I'm talking about what's popularly available, because, like, in Japan, you had the Famicom, you had all these other different, you had the disc system and everything from Nintendo, where they could connect to satellites and all this other shit. We're talking about more widespread here. But you had, so the modem, you had a modem and you had internet connectivity. You could play MMOs with it. That was almost unheard of at the time for console gaming. Very commonplace for PC gaming, but we're talking about consoles here. And so that was pretty wild. The amount of controllers, the different controller types. You had the fishing rod controller. You had the light guns. You had easily the best light gun games ever made. You know, House of the Dead 2 and others available for the system. Just fantastic. So there are other controller types that were designed for it too. And then, yeah, I mean, and the gaming library was, at the time, was a who's who. I mean, a lot of people still got to play Dreamcast games, but they played them on PlayStation 2, but that's because Sega ported them, or other companies ported them to the PlayStation 2 after the Dreamcast was prematurely, in my opinion, canceled because it just didn't end up selling well. But there's other things, like there was the game Seaman, which I could do an entire episode talking about Seaman. Whole slew of them that were incredibly unique for their day. Space Channel 5, and even some that weren't so unique, but were just, you know, fun beat 'em ups, like Ready to Rumble Boxing, you know, Echo the Dolphin. I mean, like, there's so many great games. Again, a lot of them did eventually get ported to other systems, but also, you know, some never necessarily did. Well, I guess Shenmue did finally go to the original Xbox. Excuse me. But yeah, there were just so many cool things going on with the Dreamcast. And really, the thing I think that killed it, yes, it was the PlayStation 2, but why did the PlayStation 2 kill it? I think my own little theory on this, so there's two parts of it. One part is that Sega was always making systems to beat the previous generation, not making systems to be the next generation. Even though I would argue that the Dreamcast was their all-in attempt at, just like, because it was just the kitchen sink of systems. You know, like everything in the kitchen sink. It was that system. And it was that system for a decade. You know, I mean, even that long after it was gone, no other system was really matching its feature set, in my opinion. Maybe the GameCube came close, maybe, but that's arguable. But so you have that flaw, where Sega was constantly seeming to just play catch-up, you know, and they didn't have... As great as Sonic Adventure was, you know, they didn't have the killer titles like they ended up, and they didn't have the attitude as well that the Sega Genesis had, that it appreciated for a while, that gave it some success against, you know, Nintendo. But I think what really happened is that because the Dreamcast could play CDs, and it did so very well, and it had this really cool light show that it could do, kind of like the PS1 had different visualizers, you know, for... You know, when you put in a CD or something, you press select, right? But anyway, so the Dreamcast could play CDs. However, it could not play DVDs. If it could have played DVDs, I think history would be very different right now. I think the PlayStation 2 conquered because it was the cheapest and most readily available DVD player in the world. And at the time, the DVDs were a revolution in movies and television series, you know, and home ownership of those, you know, those things. So I don't think it's because the PS2 had better games. I mean, sure, it had Final Fantasy, but Phantasy Star Online would smoke any Final Fantasy game, just about. Or any of the Phantasy Star games could have done that. And certainly, you know, Shenmue. I mean, like there were great Skies of Arcadia. There were great RPGs on Dreamcast. You know, don't make no mistake. So, I mean, eventually PS2, yes, would have better games, but also had more years to get all those games. But I don't think it was that. I really think it came down to the DVD player that ended up besting that. Now, all of that said, okay, the one thing maybe that stands against the Dreamcast is it wasn't very sexy. In fact, it was almost odd, in my opinion, that you could get a few different color ones. Like there was the Sega Sports model of the Dreamcast, which was black, which I had a buddy who bought that just because he wanted a black one. And it's like, yeah, it's a Sega system. It fucking should be black. It was weird that it was white. And I think that was a mistake. Like, I think because the PS2 was black, right? I think that was them reacting to the previous generation consoles. And I think you lose some attitude when you don't make your system black. Just ask Microsoft. You really do. I know you think that that's a small thing. It's not just a small thing. I think that's a very big deal. But anyway, I don't even know how I got on that tangent. But the system that I actually thought was better, or that I may think is better, or that I love more, it's not technically better. I love the GameCube. I just love the GameCube. The thing was so cute. It just looked like it belonged anywhere. And that's the difference with the Dreamcast, is the Dreamcast didn't look like it belonged anywhere, as to where the GameCube looked like it belonged everywhere. just a fun little system. The games for it, yeah, it didn't have, a lot of the crazy AAA titles that Dreamcast even had or that the PS2 had, but the Nintendo titles for it are just some of the best they've ever made, and they know it. They know it. That's why they keep, they re-release all of their shit, but they're definitely taking a lot of time re-releasing a lot of things from the GameCube days. And there were some, Nintendo copied Sega, I think, to some degree, where they were coming out with weird controllers, right? Like, the Donkey Kong, the Conga controllers, or the bongos, right? Sorry, not Conga. That was the game. But the bongo controllers, you had that. You had, again, where the Game Boy Advance could link up to it, and there was even the Game Boy Advance player for it, which was a nice addition. I had that. That was so cool, because Game Boy Advance games at the time were fucking brilliant. You had Golden Sun and Advance Wars and all that different stuff. It was the GameCube, and the Star Wars games for GameCube were second to none. The Resident Evil games were amazing. Now you can play those on just about anything. But at the time, the Resident Evil remasters were only on GameCube. That was a huge deal. Eventually, you would get superior versions of Dreamcast games on the GameCube, particularly the Sonic titles did very well on there. Of course, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, Super Mario Sunshine, just one of my top games of all time. Luigi's Mansion. There's so many to list off and to go down. Even one thing that really excited me was they did the updated version of GoldenEye. For that, they did release Rogue Agent for it, but they did an updated version of GoldenEye itself, a remastered version that put in Daniel Craig instead of Pierce Brosnan, which whatever about that, but it worked. And I thought that was real. That was for the Wii. That wasn't for the GameCube. Anyway, regardless, so they released Rogue Agent for it. Sorry, getting my history mixed, but all the same. Everything that came out for the GameCube, there was so much brilliance there. Ikaruga, if you never played Ikaruga, if you're into shmups and you never played Ikaruga, you can get it on PC now, but damn, that was a great game. Just tons of solid stuff that came out for the GameCube. So I want to say Dreamcast is the best of all time, but my favorite of all time, I probably got to give it to the GameCube. I just love that little system. It just seemed to be everywhere, and it came in black, by the way. So there's my answer to that. I'll cut it off there. I don't know that I do any top 8 ranking of favorite systems of all time. If I got outside of those, oh boy, maybe I would say I really like the Sega Master System. I really liked the Master System. If I could count the Game Gear, I was a big fan of the Game Gear. Half the reason that I enjoy the 3DS is that you can play a lot of Game Gear games on it. Yes, I can already play them on an emulator. Believe me, I have them. But it feels a little better when you get this very specific hardware, going for it. So, but I don't know. There's so many. TurboGrafx 16. I liked a lot of these systems. I even, the Atari Lynx. It's cool shit out there. So, but yeah, the GameCube and the Dreamcast really stand tall. That generation was, I think that was really a peak for gaming. Even though gaming makes more money now, as far as where you had that better balance of where games didn't have to make the amount of money. Like now, video games, Battlefield, whatever new Battlefield game comes out, has to clear however many millions of dollars. At the time, that wasn't necessary for games so much. And so you had a better balance, I think, of where you could get really stylistically creative and not worry about, making so much money, and it didn't have all the crazy budgets and everything unless you were Square, unless you were Squaresoft, not Square as in you're Square, which, would eventually become Square Enix because of it. But regardless, yeah, that's where I'd rank those. So, okay, let me get you your album of the week here. Your album of the week is an album that the minute it came out, I listened to it straight through. And it's track for track. The album is by a band called W.E.T, W-E.T. And W.E.T it's actually an acronym, but W.E.T, it comprises of a few different people, but the main person that you might recognize is the lead singer, who is Jeff Scott Soto, who I'm a big fan of, and who I think he's come out with like 3 albums this year from 3 from 3 different things, or at least in the past 12 months, I guess. He has his own, his self-titled Jeff Scott Soto, which he came, I think it was Retribution, and then he had the album from his band Soto itself, which was at Divac maybe. Anyway, this guy is just all over the place. He's even sung with Journey and everything, and not that he sounds like Steve Perry at all, but he can deliver a really great, passionate spirit over it. But the band W.E.T that he does is this really great melodic hard rock. Not super heavy, but this really great melodic hard rock. And there was, the previous album was Rise Up that came out a few years ago. The instant I heard that this was coming out, the album's called Earthrage, and it just came out a couple weeks ago. I was all over it. I had to have it. And it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. Kind of love songs, kind of inspirational stuff. Some of it's a little sad, but it just works. And Jeff Scott Soto just drips passion. And even though I'm an atheist, he just drips soul, into the sound of a riffing guitar. It's amazing. Or, over a riffing guitar, because he's a vocalist. So check out Earthrage from W.E.T. I can't recommend that album enough, but you got to be into the more, not cheesy, but just into hard rock. You've got to be into hard rock to really appreciate it. Also, I picked up this week, the complete score from Entrada of Rambo 3. This is a 2018 release. This is hot. This just came out last week. And hot damn, is that a good, by Jerry Goldsmith, who I think is the greatest composer of all time. What a great fucking soundtrack that is, man. I mean, when it gets into, and the helicopters flying and you just feel it. It gets so intense. Love the Rambo movies. So anyway, if you're looking for more of a soundtrack, I definitely recommend getting your hands on the complete score from Entrada that was released for 2018 of Rambo 3. It is perfect. Remastered. Everything's there. It is stunning. This is the best, because I've had at least two other releases of the Rambo music, or of Rambo 3, I should say, specifically, that have come out over the years, and this is definitely the best one. So if you don't have those already, jump on this. And it's not available, quote unquote, not available digitally, quote unquote. Entrada likes to do it where they do special releases and they want you to actually buy the CDs and everything, which I did. But that was a lot of fun too. Lot of fun. But W.E.T, the album Earthrage, you can find that just about anywhere, and you know what I mean. So okay, that's it. I'm going to wrap up this Q&A for this week. If other questions, get them in, baby. You can get them in through Patreon, whatever way you want to send them my way. And you got some other great content still to come out this week for the month of March for Patreon. And if you're curious about when our next entry in the Sovereign Tech First University audiobooks will be coming out, I am planning one for April, but we'll see, because some of the books, I like it to be shorter books, but some of the books that I have that I want to put out there are significantly longer, and I want to make sure that they can all fit in, within a month or so, and that way we're not crossing into doing this for years or something. So, I gotta figure that little part out, but then we'll make that happen. So anyway, that's enough for this week's Q&A. I will see you on the other side.